The mahogany dining table gleamed under the chandelier's soft glow, its polish reflecting the flicker of tapered candles. Crystal wine glasses stood sentinel, catching the light in fragile prisms. Penelope Hall, 38, sat at one end, her chestnut hair swept into a loose bun, her fingers curled around the stem of her glass. It trembled slightly, a faint shiver she couldn't still. At the table's other end, Daniel Carter, 42, rose to his feet, his charcoal suit impeccable, his smile practiced. Around them their closest friends and family, 10 in all, shifted in their seats, forks poised over plates of roasted turkey and sage stuffing. "To a new beginning," Daniel said, raising his glass. His voice carried across the room, smooth as the Cabernet sloshing within, confident as a man who believed he held all the cards. He paused, blue eyes locking on Penelope's. "Without you." The words hung in the air, shards of ice, piercing the warm hum of Thanksgiving chatter. Glasses froze midair. A spoon clattered against a plate. Penelope's chest tightened, but her face remained a mask. Years of practice at charity galas and firm dinners. "I'd spent all morning basting that turkey," she thought, brushing flour from my apron, perfecting the gravy he'd praised to clients. 15 years of dinners like this, and he chooses now to shatter it. Her gaze darted to Sophie Hall, 35, her younger sister, seated to her left. Sophie's hand slid under the table, finding Penelope's, squeezing hard. A lifeline. Across the table, her parents, Tom and Linda Hall, both in their early 60s, stared at their plates, forks, scraping porcelain in sudden fascination. Daniel's business partner, Greg Larson, 39, coughed into his napkin, while the others, friends who'd always admired Daniel's charm more than her quiet grace, watched in stunned silence. Penelope lifted her glass, the tremble gone now, replaced by a steadiness she didn't feel. "To a new beginning," she echoed, her voice clear, cutting through the tension like a blade. She took a deliberate sip, the wine's bitter edge curling on her tongue. Daniel's smile faltered, just for a moment. A crack in the facade of the man who'd orchestrated this night. The audience, their audience, leaned in, caught in the unspoken war igniting across the table. What he didn't know, what none of them knew, was that Penelope had already glimpsed his hand. The text messages, the plans, the life he'd scripted without her. She set her glass down, the clink a gunshot in the silence, and met his eyes. The game had begun, and she intended to play. The dining room hummed with forced conversation, a fragile veneer over the fracture Daniel had carved. Plates clinked, wine glasses refilled, the roasted turkey's aroma lingering like a ghost of the meal it had been. Penelope sat straight-backed, her napkin folded neatly beside her plate, watching Daniel carve the bird with surgical precision. The knife gleamed in his hand, its edge catching the light as he sliced, each cut a quiet assertion of control. Around them, their guests, Sophie, Tom, Linda, Greg, and the rest, picked at their food, voices pitching higher to drown the unease. Daniel raised his glass again, commanding the room's attention. "I've accepted a position in Chicago," he announced, his tone casual, as if discussing the weather. "Harrington and Mears, heading their corporate litigation division, starts in January." Murmurs of congratulations rippled around the table, a chorus of support for the man they'd always admired. Greg clapped Daniel's shoulder, grinning. "That's fantastic, Dan. We'll miss you at the firm, both of you." He glanced at Penelope, a belated afterthought. She smiled faintly, the expression not reaching her eyes. "Oh, I won't be going to Chicago," she said lightly, her voice a soft counterpoint to the room's forced cheer. Daniel's jaw tightened, the knife pausing mid-cut. As Daniel so eloquently put it in his toast, we're heading in different directions. The room fell silent again, a second fracture splitting the air. Rachel Carter, 40, Daniel's sister, cleared her throat, her blonde hair catching the candlelight. "Penelope, maybe this isn't the right time," she ventured, her tone cautious, loyal. "When is the right time, Rachel?" Penelope asked, her gaze steady. "Between dessert and coffee, or should we wait until everyone's gone home to pretend it isn't happening?" Daniel's eyes narrowed, a warning flashing in their depths. "Penelope," he said, his voice low, the tone he used when she stepped beyond his carefully drawn lines. She placed her napkin beside her plate, the gesture deliberate. "I think it's time for dessert," she said, rising. "Pumpkin pie and apple crumble in the kitchen." She turned, leaving the table's stunned silence behind, her heels clicking on the hardwood. Daniel's smile returned, tighter now, as he resumed carving. But beneath it, something flickered. Uncertainty, perhaps. Penelope felt it, a spark of defiance igniting in her chest. The kitchen's marble countertop pressed cool against Penelope's palms, grounding her as she sliced into the pumpkin pie. Dirty dishes stacked in the sink, remnants of a feast turned battlefield. The oven's warmth lingered, a faint hum beneath the clatter of plates drifting from the dining room. She moved methodically, the knife's rhythm steadying her pulse. Through the doorway, Daniel's voice floated, smooth and calculated. "She's taking it hard," he said, loud enough to carry. "Her therapist says there might be some depression involved." A lie. Penelope hadn't seen a therapist since the miscarriage 3 years ago, the one Daniel had dismissed as probably for the best for his career. 3 months ago, I was Penelope Hall. Perfect wife, she thought, her hands pausing over the pie. Organizer of charity events, hostess for Daniel's colleagues, smiling at all the right moments. That Penelope died the day I found the texts, not from another woman, but to our friends, my family, his lawyer. Plans to minimize me in the divorce, to paint me as unstable, undeserving. 15 years, reduced to a strategy. The knife resumed its work, slicing clean through the crust. Sophie appeared in the doorway, concern etching her face. Her dark hair was pulled back, her hazel eyes searching. "Need any help?" she asked, stepping closer. Penelope looked up, offering a small smile. "I've got it under control," she said, and for the first time in months, she meant it. Sophie nodded, lingering, a silent pillar. Beyond the kitchen, the dining room buzzed again, voices rising to mask the tension. But here, in this quiet space, Penelope felt it. A shift, a promise taking root. She plated the pie, her movements precise, and glanced at the framed photo on the counter. Her and Daniel on their wedding day, faces bright with hope. With deliberate care, she placed it face down in a drawer. The clatter of silverware faded as she straightened, the weight of the night settling differently now. Not a burden, but a beginning. A pale November sun struggled through the curtains, casting thin shadows across the kitchen's hardwood floor. The air smelled of stale coffee, the pot still warm from Daniel's early brewing. Penelope Hall, 38, stood by the counter, her robe cinched tight against the morning chill, pouring herself a cup. Across the room, Daniel Carter, 42, sat at the breakfast nook, impeccable in his charcoal suit, scrolling through emails on his phone. His cufflinks flashed as he adjusted them, a man armoring himself for the day. The silence between them was a new normal, polite detachment, cloaking the fracture of the night before. "We should talk about last night," Daniel said, not looking up, his voice clipped, efficient. Penelope stirred her coffee, the spoon's clink a soft defiance. "What's there to talk about? You were upset. It's understandable." His dismissal hung between them, reducing her feelings to an inconvenience. She took a sip, the bitterness grounding her. "I wasn't upset, Daniel," she replied, her tone measured. "I was surprised by your timing. 15 years, and you chose Thanksgiving to announce our separation." He finally met her eyes, his gaze calculating. But, before he could respond, her phone buzzed on the counter. She glanced at it, an unknown number. The message read, "It's done. Record secured. Meeting tomorrow as planned." Her pulse quickened, a secret thread-pulling taut. She deleted it swiftly, her fingers steady despite the jolt. Daniel set his phone down, oblivious. "I've got to go. Big case prep," he said, slipping it into his pocket. "Don't forget the Hendersons' dinner Friday. Be discreet about our situation." She nodded, feigning agreement, but as he left, the kitchen felt lighter. The game was shifting, and she held a piece he didn't see. The downtown office of Ellison Investigative Services was stark, its walls bare save for a single framed certificate. Papers littered Nora Ellison's desk, a chaotic order Penelope recognized from her own past life, organizing chaos for Daniel. Nora, 47, stood as Penelope entered, her handshake firm, her sharp eyes assessing. "Mrs. Hall," she said, gesturing to a chair. "Please, sit." Penelope settled, her purse resting on her lap, its weight heavier with the folder she'd brought. Evidence of Daniel's betrayal, pieced together over sleepless nights. Nora opened her laptop, her movements precise. "We've found what you suspected," she began, sliding a stack of documents across the desk. "Bank transfers to offshore accounts. A second mortgage on your home you didn't sign for. Stock sales from your joint portfolio." Penelope flipped through the pages, her breath catching at the numbers, the dates. "And these," Nora added, tapping a printout. "Emails between Daniel and his college friend at the Chicago firm. They've been planning this for over a year. How to minimize your share, position you as unstable." The words stung, but Penelope's hands stayed steady, tracing the evidence of her erasure. "Is it enough?" she asked, her voice low, steady despite the storm inside. Nora leaned forward, her gaze unflinching. "For leverage? Absolutely. For criminal charges, intent's harder to prove. Men like your husband care more about reputation than a few $100,000. The threat of exposure usually works." Penelope nodded, the folder pressing against her ribs as she tucked it into her purse. A shield, a weapon. She'd confronted Daniel once about missing documents, the summer cottage deed suddenly in his name alone. He'd dismissed her with plausible lies, leaving her feeling small, paranoid. Gaslighting, she'd learned recently, a term that fit too well. As she stood to leave, Nora's voice softened slightly. "Next step depends on what you want. Revenge, security, or a clean break." Penelope paused, the question catching her off guard. For months, she'd been in survival mode, gathering scraps of proof. "I want him to face consequences," she said finally, "and what's rightfully mine. I want my life back." Nora nodded approvingly. Then we moved to phase 2. Penelope stepped into the gray afternoon, the folder's weight lifting her somehow. The city buzzed around her, oblivious, but she felt it. A spark of control, flickering brighter. The cafe buzzed with midday chatter, steam rising from coffee cups in lazy curls. Penelope sat across from Sophie Hall, 35, her dark hair framing a face tight with concern. The table between them was cluttered with mugs and a half-eaten scone, a small island of normalcy. "It's all true," Penelope said, keeping her voice low. "Everything I suspected and more. Daniel's been planning this for over a year, moving assets, setting up accounts I can't touch." Sophie's eyes widened, her hand pausing mid-reach. "That bastard," she whispered. "What are you going to do?" "Fight back," Penelope replied simply, sliding a small silver key across the table. "Safe deposit box. I need you to keep something for me. Documents, evidence." Sophie took it, her expression serious. "Of course, whatever you need." Penelope glanced out the window, her breath catching as she spotted Rachel Carter, 40, across the street. Rachel's blonde hair was pulled back, her phone in hand, watching. Their eyes met briefly before she turned away, vanishing into the crowd. A cold feeling settled in Penelope's stomach. Had Daniel sent her? Later, at home, Penelope stood in the living room, the silence thick. Her phone chimed, a text from Rachel. "We need to talk. Not everything is as it seems. Meet me tomorrow, 9 a.m., Porter Square Coffee. Before she could process it, another came. Unknown number. D knows you met investigator. Deleted surveillance footage from office. Be careful. Her hand trembled as she set the phone down, her gaze landing on the bookshelf. A small red light blinked. The home security camera Daniel had installed last year, its presence nearly forgotten, his eyes always watching. She crossed the room, her steps deliberate, and looked straight into its lens. 15 years of being seen through his filter, perfect wife, invisible threat. No more. She unplugged it, the cord slipping from the wall with a soft thud, and the light died. Her reflection stared back from the darkened screen, sharper somehow. She texted Sophie. Change of plans. Need to see you now. Emergency. Grabbing her coat, she glanced around the house that no longer felt hers. The defiance surged, a quiet roar. Daniel thought he controlled the board, but she was rewriting the rules. The diner near Harvard Square smelled of burnt coffee and grease, its booths worn, offering a private hush amid the morning clatter. Penelope arrived early, choosing a seat with her back to the wall, her dark jeans and borrowed black turtleneck, Sophie's, a small camouflage against watching eyes. She'd spent the night at Sophie's, too wary to face Daniel's questions at home. The waitress dropped off a steaming mug, and Penelope wrapped her hands around it, waiting. At 9:20, Rachel Carter slid into the booth, disheveled, hair hastily tied, dark circles under her eyes, a faint yellowish bruise peeking from her jawline, half hidden by makeup. "You changed the location," Rachel said, her voice low, tense. "Yes," Penelope replied, offering no explanation, her gaze steady. An awkward silence stretched until the waitress left. "I know what Daniel's doing," Rachel began, barely above a whisper. "The asset transfers, the smear campaign, all of it." Penelope's chest flared with anger. "And you're just telling me now, after 15 years of being family?" Rachel flinched, twisting her wedding ring, a nervous habit Penelope knew well. "I only found out recently," she said, "when he asked me to help discredit you." "Discredit me how?" Penelope pressed, her voice quiet but edged. Rachel studied her coffee. "He wanted me to say I'd seen you drinking heavily, unstable since the miscarriage. Maybe on pills." The miscarriage. 3 years ago, a wound Daniel had brushed aside. Penelope's stomach clenched, but she held still. "Did you?" she asked. "No," Rachel met her eyes. "That's when I started looking. Last week, at your house, his laptop was open. I made copies." She slid a manila envelope across the table, its contents rustling. Penelope opened it, emails between Daniel and his Chicago friend Stephen, plotting her financial ruin. Her management. "Why show me this?" she asked, her voice barely steady. "Because it's wrong," Rachel said, "and because I know what it's like to be an asset, not a person." Penelope saw the bruise again, understanding dawning. "He's accelerating his plans?" Rachel added. "Since he knows you're investigating, he's meeting the firm today to freeze your accounts. Some excuse about erratic behavior." Penelope gathered the documents, standing. "Thank you," she said, her heart pounding. Rachel caught her wrist. "Be careful, Penelope. He's desperate. I've never seen him like this. Afraid." Penelope nodded, the thought startling. Daniel? Afraid of her? She hurried to her car, the envelope a lifeline, the stakes rising. Whatever came next, she wouldn't face it unprepared. The courthouse's marble halls echoed with hurried footsteps, their cold sheen swallowing the muted voices of clerks and attorneys. Penelope Hall, 38, sat beside Laura Bennett, 53, on a hard wooden bench outside Judge Evelyn Harris's chambers. Her dark jeans and cream blouse felt out of place amid the suits, but her posture was steady, her hands clutching a folder of evidence, Nora's findings, Rachel's emails. Laura, steel gray hair pulled tight, leaned close. "Let me do the talking," she whispered, her voice firm yet warm. "Answer only what's asked, Nothing more. Penelope nodded, her heart racing as the chamber door creaked open, a clerk motioning them inside. Judge Harris, 62, sat behind a broad desk, silver-rimmed glasses perched on her nose, her expression stern, unyielding. Across the table, Michael Grant, 45, Daniel's attorney, lounged with practiced ease, his smooth smile a stark contrast to the room's gravity. "Your Honor," Laura began, rising, "we weren't informed this would be a two-party hearing." Judge Harris adjusted her glasses. "Mr. Grant contacted my clerk when he learned of your petition. Given the allegations, I thought it prudent to hear both sides." Laura's posture stiffened, but she pressed on, unfazed. For 40 minutes, Laura laid out Daniel's schemes, the offshore accounts, the unauthorized second mortgage, the emails plotting Penelope's ruin. She slid documents across the desk, each page a brick in the wall she built. Judge Harris listened, her pen scratching notes, occasionally probing. "When was this mortgage signed?" Michael countered smoothly, when his turn came. "Mrs. Hall has struggled since a miscarriage 3 years ago," he said, his tone dripping sympathy. "Her recent behavior, hiring investigators, large withdrawals, raises concerns about her judgment." Penelope bit her tongue, her nails digging into her palms, but Laura's hand squeezed hers under the table, a silent anchor. The judge turned to Penelope, her gaze piercing. "Mrs. Hall, why hire an investigator?" Penelope took a deep breath, her voice steady. "Because documents disappeared from our home, accounts were restricted, the summer cottage deed reissued in Daniel's name without my consent." Judge Harris nodded, then faced Michael. "Can your client explain the second mortgage?" Michael faltered. "He'd need to address that specifically, Your Honor." She closed her folder. "All joint assets are frozen, effective immediately. Mr. Carter must provide a full accounting within 48 hours. Michael protested, but the gavel fell, sharp and final. Outside, Laura allowed a small smile. "That went better than expected. He's scrambling now." Penelope's phone buzzed. "Daniel." "Where are you?" "Thought we were having dinner." She slipped it into her purse, the weight of victory settling in. The fight wasn't over, but she'd landed the first blow. The foyer's chandelier cast jagged shadows across the hardwood as Penelope stepped inside, her purse heavy with court documents. Daniel's car was already in the driveway, an omen she couldn't ignore. She paused, gathering her resolve, then moved to the kitchen, the air thick with the scent of opened wine. Daniel stood by the counter, his suit jacket draped over a chair, pouring 2 glasses of Merlot. His movements were casual, but his shoulders were tense, a predator sensing a shift. "There you are," he said, his tone neutral, too controlled. "I was beginning to worry." "Sorry I'm late," Penelope replied, setting her purse down, the rustle of papers a secret heartbeat. "Traffic was terrible. Thought I'd make pasta." She turned to the refrigerator, pulling out ingredients, her hands steady despite the storm brewing. Daniel handed her a glass, his fingers brushing hers. "I wanted to talk about the job," he said, leaning against the counter, watching her. "Chicago's a partnership track, big salary bump. Maybe we've been too hasty about the separation. You could come with me." The words hung there, a lifeline laced with thorns, and Penelope nearly dropped the tomatoes, disbelief, sharp, in her chest. "Too hasty?" she echoed, turning to face him, her voice calm but edged. Before she could press, his phone rang, the screen lighting up with Michael's name. She knew what it meant. News of the court order. "I need to take this," he said, stepping into his office, the door clicking shut. Penelope moved fast, racing upstairs to their bedroom. She yanked a suitcase from the closet, packing essentials. Clothes, toiletries, her grandmother's jewelry box, her breath shallow but determined. Through the door, Daniel's voice rose, angry, unraveling. The office door flew open as she reached the stairs, suitcase in hand. "You went to court?" he shouted, his face flushed, eyes wild. "An emergency injunction? What the hell, Penelope? She descended, meeting his fury. You restricted our accounts, she said, calm as stone. Took out a second mortgage without me. What did you expect? He noticed the suitcase, his voice dropping to a hiss. Where do you think you're going? To Sophie's, she replied, until things cool down. He blocked the door, his frame towering. You've declared war. The Chicago buy-in needed those assets, our assets. I'm not a victim anymore, she said, meeting his gaze. Move, Daniel, or there'll be consequences. Something in her tone broke his stance. He stepped aside, his expression hardening. You won't win this, he snarled. She opened the door, the night air cool against her skin. It's not about winning, she said quietly. It's about surviving. Sophie's fourth-floor walk-up in Cambridge smelled of old books and brewing tea, a cozy sanctuary of stacked shelves and potted plants. Penelope sank onto the worn leather couch, her suitcase by her feet, drifting in and out of fitful sleep. The confrontation with Daniel replayed in her mind, his contempt, her defiance, until morning light crept through the blinds. Sophie handed her a mug of coffee at 8 a.m., her hazel eyes soft with worry. How are you holding up? She asked. I'm okay, Penelope said, sipping the warmth, grounding herself for what came next. Her phone rang. Laura Bennett, sharp and punctual. Good morning, Laura said. Phase 3. Nora's meeting us at my office at 10. The judge's order worked. Daniel's lawyer submitted a preliminary accounting last night. They're scrambling. Penelope exhaled, relief mingling with dread. At Laura's office, Nora Ellison, 47, waited, her laptop open, a stack of new documents beside it. We accessed his private email server, Nora said, nodding at Penelope's concern. Legally, through the court order, it confirms everything, and more. She slid a folder forward, and Penelope opened it, her hands trembling slightly. A life insurance policy stared back, $2 million on her, taken out 6 months ago, Daniel the sole trustee. This isn't unusual, she said, frowning. We both have insurance. Laura's voice softened. Look at the beneficiary, not Daniel directly, a trust he controls. Combined with the asset transfers, the Chicago timeline, the instability narrative, it's a pattern. Penelope's chest went cold, the implication too dark to voice. You think he... She couldn't finish. We don't know, Nora said carefully, but we're monitoring your home security, documenting everything. The divorce filing's expedited. Marie pushed papers toward her. Sign these, and give a statement about the financial discrepancies you noticed. Then stay safe. We'll handle the rest. Penelope signed, a strange calm settling over her. Nora slid a small device across the table, a new phone. Use this exclusively, she said. Your old one's linked to accounts he can track. Penelope took it, the realization chilling. Daniel had been watching her every move. As she left, Rebecca's warning echoed, He's planning something. But now, with Laura and Nora behind her, Penelope wasn't alone. The path ahead was clear, and she'd walk it on her terms. The Newbury Street Gallery's Victorian brownstone glowed in the morning light, its bay windows framing modern sculptures that twisted like frozen dancers. Penelope Hall, 38, arrived 30 minutes early, her charcoal pantsuit, Sophie's choice, crisp against the December chill, her portfolio case heavy in her hand. Jen Harper, 32, Nora's discreet associate, had driven her, posing as a friend, and now lingered nearby, watchful. We're covering the entrances, Jen said, her voice low. If anything feels off, leave. Penelope nodded, but this interview was more than a job. It was her defiance, her future, and she wouldn't let Daniel steal it. Inside, the gallery was hushed, its polished floors reflecting the soft hum of possibility. A young receptionist directed her to a sitting area, and through glass doors, Penelope glimpsed Margaret Frost, 58, the director, on the phone, in her office. Margaret's silvery bob gleamed under track lighting, her presence formidable even at a distance. 10 minutes passed, then 20, the delay gnawing at Penelope's nerves. Daniel's shadow loomed. Finally, Margaret emerged, her expression unreadable. "Ms. Hall," she said, extending a hand. "Thank you for your patience. Come in." The office was spare, a massive contemporary painting dominating one wall, its bold strokes worth more than Penelope's car. She sat, placing her portfolio between them. "Before we begin," Margaret said, folding her hands, "your husband called yesterday. He raised concerns about your stability, said some pieces might be his work." Penelope's breath caught, but she kept her face neutral. "That's not true," she replied, her voice steady. "Every piece is mine, and my divorce doesn't affect my readiness." Margaret nodded slowly. He was insistent, unusually so. She opened the portfolio, studying Penelope's drawings, charcoal sketches, restoration samples. "These are impressive," she said, her tone warming. "Technical skill, sophisticated color theory." They discussed her vision, her passion, and Penelope felt the doubt melt away. "Why now, after 15 years?" Margaret asked. "Because I remembered who I was before I was a wife," Penelope said, "and art's my truest voice." Margaret smiled. "Part-time to start, full-time potential in 6 months. Monday 9 a.m.? Penelope exhaled, relief flooding her. "Yes." Outside, the sunlight felt brighter, her victory sharp and sweet. Sophie's living room glowed with the flicker of a single lamp, wine glasses clinking as snow dusted the windows, softening Beacon Hill's edges. Penelope sat on the couch, her new phone beside her, its screen free of Daniel's reach. Sophie, 35, poured a second round, insisting on celebrating the gallery job. "To new beginnings," she toasted, her smile proud. Penelope raised her glass, the Merlot's warmth a quiet comfort after days of battle. Laura's call earlier had sealed it. Judge Harris granted emergency spousal support, $5,000 monthly, full asset disclosure ordered. "They're negotiating," Laura had said triumphant. "He doesn't want a trial." Her phone rang, shattering the calm. Daniel's number. Penelope hesitated, then answered, speaker on. "Penelope," he slurred, his voice thick with drink. "You think you've won." She set her glass down, the clink deliberate. "This isn't about winning, Daniel," he pressed on, ignoring her. 15 years. I gave you everything, made you everything." The accusation stung, but she'd shed that lie. "No," she said quietly, "you didn't make me. If anything, you unmade me, piece by piece. That's over now." Silence stretched, heavy, broken by his uneven breath. "The gallery called," he muttered. "Said they hired you." "How'd you get Margaret to ignore me?" Penelope thought of her work, her truth cutting through his lies. "Because I was ready," she said, simply. "Ready for a new beginning without you." His own words turned back on him, closed the circle. She ended the call, the click of full stop. Sophie watched, concern mingling with pride. "You okay?" she asked. Penelope nodded, raising her glass again. "I think I will be." Outside, the snow thickened, a white veil over the past. Rebecca's earlier text, "Dee knows about the court, he's drinking, be careful," faded into irrelevance. Daniel's threats were hollow now, his power slipping. Penelope leaned back, the couch's leather cool against her skin. The legal war would continue, but tonight she'd won something greater. Herself. Penelope stood at Sophie's window, her breath fogging the glass, a wine glass cradled in her hand. The snow fell steady now, dusting Beacon Hill in a soft, unbroken white, each flake a whisper of December's dual promise, endings and beginnings. Beyond the pane, streetlights blurred into halos, their glow softening the night's edges. She wore Sophie's borrowed sweater, its wool a quiet embrace, her portfolio resting on the table behind her, a testament to the day's triumph. The gallery job, the court's rule in steps toward a life no longer defined by Daniel's shadow. 15 years undone, she thought, and yet here I am, whole, not unmade. The realization settled over her, light as the snow outside. She'd spent so long as Penelope Hall perfect wife, her dreams deferred to his ambition, art reduced to a hobby, her voice muted by his narrative. Now, that silence was breaking. The charcoal pencil she'd bought yesterday waited in her bag. Its weight, a promise to herself, a thread to the woman she'd been before. An art history major with dreams of creation, not just curation. She took a sip of wine, its warmth lingering on her tongue, and watched a child dart across the street below, laughter muffled by the snow. The sound stirred something, hope, fragile but growing. The legal battles loomed, but they no longer owned her. December whispered of closure, but Penelope heard possibility. She turned from the window, her reflection faint but clear, and smiled. The future was hers to draw,